Well, good morning. Thank you for coming. Today's topic is probably one of the most exciting sessions we'll have here on Construct Canada and Construct International, which is opportunities in Latin America. And the reason why it's exciting is that few markets are as familiar and as dynamic and fast-growing as Latin America has been for the past decade and will continue to be on many years to follow. My name is Luiz Zorzella. I am a principal with mQuant. We're a consulting firm and we help companies that are either growing in different markets or they're expanding into new areas of business or they're accelerating their current growth. And I will be talking about opportunities in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And I will leave to my friend here, Rinaldo, to talk about the mother of all markets, which is Brazil, which probably is as complex and as big as the four markets I'm going to be discussing combined. So we'll start about talking about some general concepts about Latin America. I'll go quickly to specific opportunities because I understand that nobody's here to go back to school and have a lot of data dumped on you, but I think that there are a couple of important things to remember about Latin America. One of them is that Latin America is one of the most urbanized regions in the world. It is more urbanized than Europe is. It is, with about 80% of urbanization, it is more than Europe, more than Central Asia, way more than Eastern Asia, and significantly more than Sub-Saharan Africa or the Middle East. One of the reasons why this is important is that even though a lot of construction opportunities in some of the emerging markets have been generated because of the process of urbanization that you see in China, India, and certain parts of Africa, this is not the case in Latin America. People in Latin America have been in urban centers for about 40 years now, and this process is not accelerating, if anything. The second concept is that exactly because Latin America is this urbanized, its market is extremely concentrated. So I said that if Latin America were 100 people, 20 of them will be living in 12 cities. These 12 cities, if you want to do business in Latin America, those are the names you should remember. There are two in Mexico, which is Mexico City and Guadalajara. Some of the capitals, which includes Buenos Aires, Santiago, Lima, Bogota, and Caracas, and then there are 5 in Brazil. And as I said, Brazil is as complex and as big as the rest of the markets together, and it's the only one besides Mexico that has a significant population in a city that's not a capital. Why this is relevant, it's because first, for companies in the construction sector, urban centers are by nature very important, but also because when you're doing business with these countries, I would encourage you not to think in terms of how to do business with Brazil or how to do business with Chile, but instead what can be done about starting in Santiago or starting in Lima, which concentrate a lot of the market, both final market as well as potential partners, and it's way simpler to digest than thinking about the whole country for companies that are starting. The third thing that it's important to remember about Latin America, and this is something that's kind of applicable to most emerging markets in the past decade, is that the most important phenomena driving any demand in emerging markets, and especially in Latin America, has been the emergence of the middle class. In Latin America, in the past 10 years, the middle class grew by 50%. It means that one out of three persons currently in the middle class were not in the middle class 10 years ago in the region. These are people who are now consuming, they are making renovations, they are thinking of making long-term plans, they're acquiring durables, they are thinking of moving from squattered cities and from slums to proper housing. So even though there isn't a lot of demand from the process of people migrating from rural areas to urban areas, there is a lot of demand from people who are finally, for the first time in their lives, capable of thinking in terms of long plan, thinking in terms of what should I do about my home, where should I live, and they can actually afford to do so, and they want to because they have been exposed to these markets for quite some time. On top of the emergence of the middle class, there is also the affluent markets, the wealthy, the segments that have had global purchase capacity in the past. They have been expanding as well. So the Credit Suisse estimates that in the next 5 years, the number of millionaires in Latin America will double. And this is only talking about millionaires. On top of millionaires, there's what people who used to be in the middle class before all that. I'll pause here for 1 second. If you want to understand anywhere in Latin America and your brain is just too tired to remember anything else, any specific opportunities that, Colombia is very good at like wind and Mexico is solar or anything like this. The 3 topics to remember is, 1, Latin America is urbanized and concentrated in a few large cities. 2, middle class is growing. A lot of people are migrating from lower class to middle class, and now they are purchasing big items. And 3rd, the wealthy and the traditional middle class is also an expanding market. Right. So I'll talk a little bit about Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Peru, and I'll talk a little bit about specific opportunities for each one of them. Before I go there, there is the final one, which is Latin America is a region that traditionally has underinvested in infrastructure. So besides traditional consumer type of demand in the construction sector, infrastructure is also a topic that will be extremely hot in the next years. The exception maybe being Chile, which has traditionally been very, very well behaved, but Brazil is probably one of the least developed markets in the world in terms of installed infrastructure, and they are currently hitting some major bottlenecks to their growth because of this. So I'll go to the specific markets. Mexico. What is Mexico? I think that the one thing that I remember Mexico is that Mexico is like Canada, but it's about 14 years younger, and it's growing really fast. Why is it Canada? Like GDP of Mexico is almost the same thing as Canada. The size of export and import markets in Mexico is roughly about the same size as Canada. The construction sector in Mexico is almost about the same size as Canada's. The 2 markets are surprisingly similar, respected like the obvious differences in terms of size of population, location, but a good rule of thumb is that like in terms of size for construction companies and companies in the construction sector, both markets are equivalent. Both are in North America. Both are members of NAFTA, so there are good facilities for companies in Canada to deal with Mexican companies. Both border the U.S. and both have a long tradition of and a good integration, both in terms of business and the economy. The major striking difference is that, again, Mexico is significantly younger than Canada and the U.S. While the average age, the medium age here in Canada is about 40 years old. Mexican is about 27, which for companies in the construction sector has obvious implications. Like a lot of people are still going through the process of like buying their homes and doing all the home building and home improvement things that people do during their 30s. And the GDP of Mexico has been growing at least 2% faster than the GDP of Canada, which for a sector that is as dependent as to the GDP as the construction sector, the implications are very obvious as well. What are the most attractive opportunities in Mexico today? I'll say that it's a very long list. There are some good opportunities in public works. Last year, Mexico edited a framework for public-private partnerships, which is very exciting and provides some a good reference for works in infrastructure. Construction related to improvement in transportation and telecommunications the government is also putting a lot of a big budget behind that to improve the infrastructure in Mexico. The energy sector is a complicated one in Mexico. Pemex controls a lot of the activity and has underinvested over the years. As a result, like Mexico, for example, is a net oil exporter, but a net fuel importer. They need investments in the area, and this will generate some opportunities in the construction sector, but it still remains to be seen how it will happen or when, but it's something to keep on the radar. As I said, Mexico is young and growing, and with emerging middle class, so on the corporate sector and housing, everything is booming. Shopping centers are expanding like crazy. Offices, factories. There has been a lot of discussion, a lot of changes lately on regulation for the housing policy, which should lead to some interesting opportunities in housing there as well. Mexico has some aspirations of investing heavily in sustainable and renewable energy. So especially on the solar side, there should be some interesting opportunities there. And again, Mexico is part of NAFTA, so both to exporters and importers of products and services is a very attractive market that's very close to home and very similar, very like less exotic than other emerging markets. Both Rinaldo and I will leave some time for a Q&A at the end of this, but if there is any clarification during my presentation, feel free to go back to school and raise your hand. Chile. Chile is the well-behaved, boring, but exciting country in Latin America. Chile is a AA+ credit rating country. It has been extremely stable, government has had a surplus for as long as I can remember. They have huge copper reserves. Traditionally, they have been, their saving rate has been extremely high for any standards. Again, if you want to look for a market with no negative surprises on the economic side, Chile is probably the way you would like to look at in Latin America. As you see, Chile has been growing also way faster, and as in a way that's as stable as Canada has been for the past 20 years. The only times that Chile had had actually like a negative growth on the economy side has been in '99 and 2009, which was also when Canada was not doing that well. So Chile is the stable sibling in Latin America. Opportunities in Chile are also there are lots of opportunities there. On the housing side, most of you will remember that in 2010 Chile had like a significant earthquake. Almost 1 million homes were destroyed, and it took a significant toll on the economy. Most of the reconstruction from the earthquake is already over or at the finishing stages. The opportunity there is obviously that with companies that had been dedicated to reconstructing Chile for the past 2-3 years, they now need to reposition, and as they reposition, they will be looking for partners, new ideas, new technologies, new tooling, and basically new business opportunities for them. On the energy side, Chile is aspiring to be extremely like a leader worldwide in sustainable energy efficient construction. Chile is of all the examples we're going to give here, Chile is the worst position in terms of energy because they do not have hydrocarbons in Chile. They depend on imports for absolutely 100% of their non-renewable energy. So they want the government of Chile has included some investments and have incentives for companies to build energy efficient buildings. Companies in this sector should have some interesting opportunities there. Construction related to transmission of energy. Chile is also heavy on hydroelectricity, which is generated far from the consumption centers. So there is also a lot of construction required related to bringing the energy from generation to consumption. Transportation in general, urban and interurban are priorities for the Chilean government, and infrastructure related to the expansion of copper production is also an interesting opportunity there. Housing is a slightly complicated topic. As I said, the Chilean market has been growing significantly on the housing side, but mostly because of reconstruction from the earthquake. You will see, if you look at like figures for the last 3 years, like the numbers in housing are extremely enticing. You have to read them with some caution because not necessarily these numbers will perpetuate into the future. And if you want to go into anything that's related to housing there, I advise you to be very selective in what you pursue. But retail, shopping centers, healthcare facilities, all these other parts are still growing, and the demand should continue to be strong in Chile in the next years. And Chile is probably the freest market in terms of foreign trade and liberalization in Latin America. So for companies in export and import, there are opportunities in almost every sector in Chile. How are you doing? Good. Colombia. Colombia is, unfortunately, when people say Colombia, it still brings me memories of of images that I remember from the 90s, where Colombia had problems with guerrilla, with the narco traffic. A lot of it have improved since then, but for some reason, I think it's probably because of the stage I was in my life. It still brings me those memories. About the beginning of the early 2000s, Colombia did a significant turnaround. One of these, the war on drugs was won, basically. They still have a few pockets of resistance in the jungles, but it's an order of magnitude different than it was in the past. And Colombia figured out that they needed to become competitive globally. So Colombia was one of the leaders in Latin America to say, well, the sectors that we're going to be investing in, we want to be world class. They established some strong incentives for sectors that had a solid plan and solid leadership to become world class. The bar was much higher than what traditionally you will see in terms of incentives in the region. The Colombian government created a law, which right now drew me a blank on the name of the law, but it's like something like fiscal stability law, which basically allows the government to sign contracts with foreign investing companies that will basically ensure that the terms, including taxes, including general regulations, the terms that are valid at the time of the signing of that contract will be valid for 20 years. So even though the law can change and tax rates and fiscal policy can change over time, in Colombia, investors in Colombia can be shielded for a period of 20 years, which, if you see here the figures in terms of foreign direct investment in Colombia, that's basically here. That's when foreign direct investments in Colombia took a major boost. And Colombia and a lot of other countries are following the example. Peru is toying with a similar legal framework, and I know that other Latin American markets are also examining the Colombian case to see if there are lessons that they can learn from it. Right? Legal stability agreement, and there you go. Where are the opportunities in Colombia? So Colombia's current infrastructure plan places a lot of emphasis on housing and infrastructure in general. So there are some good opportunities there. There is a significant pent-up demand for housing in Colombia, and there are some good incentives from the Colombian government. Intercity transportation is probably the most important topic that the Colombian government has been focusing on. Again, infrastructure is a sector with very long cycles. So Colombia still has poor intercity transportation infrastructure as a legacy of the problems they had on the 90s. Like it was not safe to transport things from one city to another. So Colombia is probably one of the few markets other than Brazil that has significant sophisticated demand in several different cities, just because they were isolated one from the other. So Bogota, Cali, Medellin are all large cities. Each one of them have chambers, like dynamic chambers of commerce, dynamic international trade facilities, ports, and good economic integration. They've also published a public-private partnership law last year, which should, the details are still being finalized, but there should be some interesting opportunities there. And oil-related infrastructure in general and construction in general in Colombia is also an interesting opportunity. Colombia is oil-rich, one of the the third most significant producer in South America, and it's a sector that they look very dearly. It's not as significant for the economy, but extremely significant for their exports. And they're also well integrated with North America. They have free trade agreements with the US and Canada. So export and import markets are also present some interesting opportunities in Colombia. All right. And finally, Peru. Peru is the fastest growing country in the region. It has been growing about over 5.5%, 5.6% a year since the year 2000, which is phenomenal. It puts Peru in part with I don't know, like China or India in terms of growth rate. In the previous 10 years, Peru has lifted 2/3 of its poor from the poor to lower class, but no longer like living below the poverty line. HSBC, they're forecasting that Peru should continue to grow over the next 50 years at least 2.5% on top of the growth of the Canadian economy. So that's practically twice the growth we had, Canada had this year. So Peru, if you want like a fast-growing, dynamic economy, Peru is probably the best choice in the region. And what are the opportunities? There is on corporate housing again, like they're growing like crazy. Like prosperity is generating a boom in everything related to construction and real estate, from housing to shopping centers to offices to factories, you name it. Like they have more demand than they can probably meet internally, and they're open to for business. Mining and infrastructure, they're also very strong also sectors very strong in Peru, and there are strong demand from mining sector related works, and especially on railways they have. And again, exports and imports, they are a very open market. They have a similar law in terms of stability for foreign investors, and you will find Peru like a very attractive market for investing opportunities. All right, so I'll just summarize what I just said. Again, the three things to remember about Latin America is very urban, emergence of middle class, and growth of the affluent class. Mexico is like Canada, growing faster, with very good opportunities in housing, corporate and public works. Chile is the most stable economy in the region, rich in copper, and with very good opportunities in energy conservation, energy efficient buildings, transportation and mining. Colombia was elected by the World Bank as the most investor-friendly and country in the region, extremely competitive, and has good opportunities in housing, transportation, and energy. And Peru is the fastest growing economy with opportunities everywhere, basically. Right? Before I pass to Ronaldo, who's going to talk about Brazil, or the regions of Brazil, I don't know how his presentation is going to be. Are there any specific questions you would like me to answer about the these 5 markets. Yes.
Just, generally speaking, unions in those countries or in those countries or just cities, how do they treat foreign employees?
That's a very good question. Yes, most of these countries they are extremely friendly towards foreign investors and foreign companies operating in the country. With the exception of Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, they realized that they do not have critical mass to have some of the critical industries they need to be competitive. So they're extremely open to be for like bringing foreign workers temporarily for projects or for companies that are establishing or operating out of a hub and serving their markets from those hubs. So they're very easy to and friendly in terms of both dealing with foreign companies as well as the treatment of foreign nationals. Yes.
I'd just like to comment that in your presentation that the mining and infrastructure, oil and gas projects which require very heavy investment in technology is a great market for Canada and the U.S. But in terms of housing, buildings, I worked over in Latin America and they're totally different standards to what we have. And it's very difficult for a Canadian company to be competitive and even to work to those standards, those low standards, particularly since a lot of those mountainous areas are in seismic zones. They have seismic standards in their codes, but no one ever goes to it. We have to do it or we would be in trouble. So it's a totally different landscape where we go in, where they are, and you just can't be competitive with the construction companies over there for any building construction. Unless you're building, the requirement is for a North American or international client, and you're building to international standards.
That's a very good point. And like construction methods and standards are very different. Chile has a problem with earthquake, which has made its architecture world reference. And the Canadian companies sometimes face some difficulties adjusting to this. I would say that as a general rule, for companies that are venturing into international markets, not as an exporter, but they actually want to establish a local presence, having the right local partner is critical to the success. And this is not only valid for Latin America, but valid for any foreign market in general. But on what I would say is that if you want to, I don't know, if you want to go to Chile and be a real estate developer, I think you're going to have a hard time doing that. Despite the attractiveness and stability of the market, it's going to be hard for you because the learning curve is too steep, and it's a sector that people already know very well. It's well dominated by local players. But if you want to, if you have some good technology in terms of, again, energy conservation, smart buildings, solar energy, like all these type of things, those are up for grabs. I would still go with a strong local partner. They are very friendly to doing partnerships with foreign companies. These markets are very open. Spoiler alert, not as like Brazil is, contrary to Brazil, which is a little bit more isolated than the others, but those countries are very, very open. They have tradition of doing partnerships and doing joint ventures with foreign companies, and that's the smart way to go. Thank you. Yes.
A question about the PPP legislation. You mentioned that most of them have already established PPP legislation. Do you know if any of them follow the Canadian model?
Sorry, what's...
In terms of the framework that they are using, I'm just wondering, because that would give a competitive advantage, I guess, to Canadian companies if they would have followed, if they would have worked with a Canadian consulting firm, for example, in terms of putting together the framework for the P3.
Yes, yes, I understand. I have never seen a comparative analysis of the frameworks. And I know that, like, while, for example, Mexico is a little bit more mature and probably more aligned with North American standards, in other regions like Colombia, for example, some of the details are still being worked out. So I couldn't really comment anything specific about this. Sorry.
Because I find that that is a service that Canada can offer as well to countries in terms of, putting the framework together when it comes to the legislations. As a result, we help industry to participate in projects in the future.
Yes, yes, that's a very valid point. I wouldn't be able to respond with any more detail than what I just said, but it's a very good point. Yes. Yes.
Can you tell me if any of these countries have anything similar to WSIB that we have here?
Chile will be the most similar to our standards, and somewhat Mexico. Yes.
But not Peru or whatnot? There's no regulations at all about that?
Some of the issues are similar, and they might vary from sector to sector. So this is why it's a little bit too difficult to have like a blank statement that answers this question. Mining, which is a very important sector in all these countries that I told you, and energy in general, they tend to be more world class, so they tend to be more strict. For like traditional sectors like services, especially a lot of informal economy still in the region, less so. But it's hard for me to give just like a one blank answer to all of these.
There's no safety precautions that are taking effect for the workers and whatnot?
Oh, there is, yes. No, I think that I thought that what you were asking is if they were in line with how things are here in Canada. They are. I've never seen a comparative analysis, but they do. All of these countries have work and safety regulations, and they are. They tend to follow local. They were developed locally, so even though they got some best practices, global standards, they were developed indigenously, and so it's. What I mean is that it's not as simple as just transporting your policies and your procedures from that you have here in Canada to locally. You actually have to get someone local to advise you on this topic.
If I just can, sorry, if I
Yes,
just can add
please.
to this, when it comes to labor laws and labor standards, in Latin America, and specifically in Brazil, it's a nightmare.
It
I can imagine, I was going to say.
It's
it
a
must be
nightmare.
something-
So by nightmare, I don't mean that there isn't anything. It's most of the time it's on the contrary. There is too much.
Too much, yes.
There is too much. So when we talk about safety precautions, maybe there is too much, and because there is too much and it's not standardized, depends and varies from industry to industry, for you to be in compliance with, it's a huge nightmare. So you need to have someone who really understands about the subject working with you,
Okay.
and there is nothing like if you look at the Canadian standards or US standards or anywhere else, I can speak about Brazil. Brazil likes to do things the Brazilian way.
Yes.
So it will always be different,
Yeah.
always be very
No,
unique.
exactly.
Sorry.
No, that's a good point.
Very good.
Again, one thing is that with the exception of Brazil and Mexico, most of these countries realize that they do not have the scale to establish their own standards. So like, I'll give you one example. The equivalent of the FDA in each one of these countries, they tend to accept drugs that are registered and that have been approved in processes from the FDAs in other larger, more important markets. Like construction standards, some of the things in construction also, they tend to accept some of the some of the like approvals of materials and procedures that have been approved in other markets. So they realize that they cannot, if they want foreign companies to invest there, companies are not going to reinvent everything and reprocess everything to get a market like, I don't know, Ecuador or Panama or these. In some areas, they still have a lot of local invention, and labor-related laws is one of those areas.
Can I just make a quick comment? I know we don't have much time.
Yes.
But in working in Latin America, what I've found is that Canadian companies that work there are very particular about following safety standards because they're registered with WSIB here, and that could, any adverse condition that would occur there would also affect the ratings over here. And so they're very careful about that. They have a lot of safety people from Canada who go out there and implement those standards on projects. Because they have to,
Yes.
It's a requirement.
Yes.
And so we do that when we go overseas.
Yes. Right, thank you. I'm leaving here before I pass to Ronaldo, I'll leave here my contact information. If anyone wants to talk to me, like just come here, we can chat. If you want a copy of this presentation, if you want to be included in my email distribution list, just drop me your business card here. I will send a copy to you, and I'll include you in the list. Thank you.